And then we'll post the program on our website. I imagine we'll get it up on the website sometime next week. So, so in case if you know someone who couldn't be here, had a conflict or whatever, you can let them know, and I'll let our list know that it's up on the website for people who couldn't make it tonight. Okay. So our speaker introduced Wendy Jason, who is the director of the Justice Arts Coalition, which involves teaching artists, arts advocates, and currently and formerly incarcerated artists and allies, and trying to transform the power of the arts to reimagine justice. And their work stems from a premise that art can serve as a connective tissue, weaving its way back and forth through prison walls to foster and strengthen relationships between people inside and out. Wendy has 25 years experience in social services, and she's worked in a variety of settings: residential treatment centers, mental health centers, schools, shelters, prisons, and jails in a number of different states: Connecticut, Massachusetts, Florida, Alaska, New Mexico, Maryland, and DC. And so she has firsthand experience of the challenges confronted by those most impacted by mass incarceration. So I'm going to turn it over to Wendy now, and Wendy then will also introduce in a bit Carol Alden, our other speaker.
Thanks so much, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here tonight with all of you. I don't know about where you all are, but I live in Tacoma Park, but I am currently in Connecticut visiting one of my sisters, and it's very, very cold here. It all of a sudden feels like winter. And they don't like to use the heat much in their house. So if you see me at some point after I finish talking, get up and run and get another layer or a space heater, you'll know that I'm frigid. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Justice Arts Coalition, and then I am excited to be able to kind of hand the mic over to Carol Alden, who's an artist that I've known for a couple of years, and who's a much more interesting person for you to talk with than I am. So let me tell you a little bit about Jack. And I'll also say that we're joined tonight by one of our interns, Jocelyn, and one of our superstar volunteers, Jamie, who I might also ask to chime in at some point. So as Chuck said, Justice Arts Coalition uses the arts as a bridge between people inside and outside of prison. We work to unite teaching artists, arts advocates, currently and formerly incarcerated artists and allies, to harness together the transformative power of the arts to reimagine justice. Our work, as Chuck said, stems from the premise that art really is a connective tissue. It can bridge us together, and we believe that it has the power to do so even through prison walls to foster and strengthen relationships. We acknowledge that art reminds us of our shared humanity, our common struggles and sacrifices, that every one of us has unique gifts and a unique story to share. We believe that creating a work of art, whether it's a song, a dance, or a poem within the barren confines of prison, is truly a courageous and truly a liberatory act. It's a reclaiming of identity, of possibility, of worth, and a demand to be visible. We affirm and uplift those who venture onto this path towards internal freedom, and we strive to amplify their voices so that more and more people outside of prison will feel compelled to fight for their physical freedom. So we serve as a unifying body for people engaged in art making in and around carceral institutions across the country. We provide numerous opportunities for the nearly 300 incarcerated artists in our network to share their work both through our own platforms and by facilitating connections for them to opportunities offered by partner organizations. Some of those opportunities have come through PEN America's prison writing program. Many of you might be familiar with PEN America, the literary organization. They have for years had a prison writing program, and they put out a wonderful anthology every year of writings by people in prison. And This year, Justice Arts Coalition was invited to offer the opportunity to some of the artists in our network to create works of visual art inspired by each of the literary pieces in the anthology. And that is actually, I think it's just coming off out of the publisher and should be out and available soon from the PEN America website. We partnered with MoMA PS1. They have an amazing exhibit right now in New York of art by people who are have been incarcerated, and a number of the artists in our network have their work in that exhibition, including Carol, who you'll hear from in a little bit. And so we provide all kinds of opportunities to link with other organizations that are hosting exhibitions or selling artwork or holding literary events. So we do as much as we can to create those inroads for artists in prison. We also host our own exhibitions. Prior to the pandemic, we held a number of exhibitions in the DC area. Unfortunately, we can no longer do that, at least for the time being. We had to cancel four exhibitions because of the pandemic, which was hugely, hugely disappointing for us and, of course, for the artists that we work with. But our exhibitions in DC have been amazing and have brought so many more people into our community. We also are planning on hosting an online exhibition in the winter. So this will be our first try at that. It will be a fundraiser and will feature work by probably 50 pieces by incarcerated artists, as well as works by teaching artists and other people in our network outside of prison. We have a number of online galleries on our website, and we host Art Links events, which are community events. They used to be held at Rhizome DC in Tacoma. They're now held on Zoom, where community members are invited to view new works that incarcerated artists have sent us and write letters to artists in response, sharing their reflections and their feedback. So volunteers will choose a couple of pieces of work that speak to them really powerfully and write a letter to the artist, just sharing their thoughts about it, sharing the feelings that came up when they looked at the artwork, and we send those letters then to the artists. It's kind of a one-off correspondence situation, not an ongoing one. And the artists are always just so, as you can imagine, so pleased. And it's so affirming to receive that feedback from people outside. So they know they're not creating in a vacuum, and they know that their work is having an impact on people. We also have an arts-focused correspondence program, which we call the Partner Project. So it is a pen pal program, much like the one that all of you are involved in, except our focus is art and all forms of the arts. So we pair artists on the inside with artists and arts appreciators on the outside. And the focal point of their correspondence is their creative work. And so it in some ways serves as kind of like a peer mentoring opportunity. And we have about, I think maybe 150, 160 pairs of people writing to each other in our partner project right now. And we also support teaching artists and arts organizations across the country that provide, or prior to the pandemic provided, programs in prisons by serving as a hub for resources and community building, professional development, and now more than ever, collective problem solving. This has become really, really important during the pandemic because, as you all know, all of the programming in prisons came to a halt. And that included, hundreds of arts programs across the country. So we've been working since the start of the pandemic with teaching artists to kind of reimagine what arts programming can look like from a distance, and providing opportunities for teaching artists to support each other in developing new curricula that can be sent either by mail, in some cases via video, so that folks inside can still have an opportunity to express themselves, to spend their time in a way that feels fulfilling and meaningful, and to connect with people outside through that. So we do that through we have weekly Zoom meetings for teaching artists and other folks involved in that work. And we have every other week, we have Zoom calls that are dedicated to talking about distance learning, and teaching artists join us to share their curricula that they've been designing, and talk about the successes and challenges they're having with creating distance learning programs. We've also just recently launched our own distance learning program. This is very new for us. While we have been, while we stay in correspondence with artists in prison across the country, we've never actually, as an organization, facilitated an arts program in a prison. We work typically just with individual artists, not with the prison as a whole. So we've started a correspondence program with women at the Maryland Correctional Institution for Women in Jessup. And that just launched a couple of weeks ago. We brought together a team of 4 local teaching artists, in one specializing in theater, 2 in creative writing and poetry, and 1 in visual art, all with years and years of experience working in prisons, and very eager to get back to working with incarcerated folks because they hadn't been able to do their work since the start of the pandemic. And they've been collaborating on creating curricula. So it's a multidisciplinary curricula that comes in the form of a packet that we're going to be dropping off at the prison every 2 weeks. And every time we drop a packet off, we'll be able to pick up any kind of creative work that the participants have done. And so we'll be able to provide them with feedback and reflections about their work. We're excited about that. It's a 6-month pilot project. We got a little bit of funding through the Maryland State Arts Council so that we can compensate the teaching artists a little bit. And we're doing that. The focus of our Giving Tuesday was to raise money for that because we didn't get all that we asked for. All of you who work with nonprofits know that sometimes you just can't get what you ask for. So we're trying to supplement that budget right now. But really excited about that program. It's the first of its kind in Maryland. When I initially approached the warden at the women's prison, there were no arts programmings functioning at all since the start of the pandemic. And even prior to the pandemic, there were very, very few in Maryland prisons. A couple of volunteers going in, and then there are, some of you might know, Project Youth Arts Reach or Art of 8 was going into a couple of the prisons and jail and the Montgomery County Detention Center and youth facilities, but really not a lot happening. So when I approached the warden at the women's prison, I was able to say, you're going to be responsible for creating, helping us to create the first program of its kind in the state. And that felt like a big deal to her. And I'm so glad that she was open to it. Our network also includes a lot of artists' family members and loved ones on the outside. We stay in contact with them. And when I say we, I speak of many, many volunteers and interns. We have 9 interns right now. I think we might have 11 next semester. And a group of volunteers that kind of span across the country who help us to stay in touch with every artist who connects with us from prison. So in addition to the people who are participating in our pen pal program, we have correspondence volunteers who help to ensure that every single piece of mail that we as an organization receive from someone in prison, whether it's just an inquiry about the organization, how do I get involved, what do you do, or excuse me, or they're sending us their artwork because they want it in our online galleries or to be exhibited, every single one of those gets a personal response from one of our volunteers. And that's really important because that really is the heart and the core of the work that we do is those, is fostering and sustaining those relationships with folks inside. And little special events here and there. We have done quite a few online events this summer with other organizations. One thing that we're gearing up for right now is last year we had an in-person holiday card making event at Red Dirt Studios in Mount Rainier, where I have a little workspace. It was wonderful. We had 40 or so volunteers come, and we had snacks and music, and everyone made a handmade card to send to one of the artists in our network for the holidays. We can't do that this year. We're going to do it on Zoom. So we're doing that a week from, I guess, Jocelyn, December 12th, week from Saturday.
Yeah.
I don't know what the date is anymore.
Yeah,
I don't even know what today is. And if anyone is interested in that, what we'll do is we'll just join on Zoom. Maybe we'll play some music. Maybe we'll drink hot cocoa together. I don't know, but everyone will make a card to send to one of the artists on our mailing list in prison. And we'll give the whole spiel that many of you know about all of the mail regulations and what you can and can't draw with or write with and all of that. And it'll be a nice time to build some community and just try to spread a little holiday cheer. So Jocelyn's actually going to drop her email address in the chat. So if anyone would like to sign up for that, you can email Jocelyn and we'll get you the Zoom link and the registration information. We have a number of different ways that volunteers support our work. We are still fully a volunteer-run organization and have been for quite some time now. We just got our 501c3 status a couple of weeks ago. So hopefully that will help to change things here in the near future and we'll be able to bring on staff. I'd say our volunteers and interns combined, we function as though we have 6 or 7 full-time staff members at any given time. We're doing a lot. We're a very busy crew, and volunteers help with our mail, as I said. Volunteers help with fundraising. Volunteers help with, obviously there are volunteers on our board of directors. Volunteers help with planning events. We're planning a national conference that will be online for the spring. We have a group of volunteers helping with that. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in volunteering in any way, if you have any skills to share, grant writing, social media, I don't know, organizing things online, all kinds of stuff. We are always looking for help. And Jamie, who is here right now, is our volunteer coordinator. She is our volunteer coordinator. And you can send her a message if you're interested in volunteering with us, and she can give you a link to how to sign up to do that. I think that's about all for me. And I know that there are some questions in the chat. Should I do that? Should I look at the chat before? How do you get those handmade cards in? Oh, wow. That's a really good question.
We'll come back to the questions later.
I can answer that one really quickly before we kind of lose track of it. And then I'll introduce Carol. So the handmade cards, restrictions were a little looser last year. They've tightened up a lot since the start of the pandemic. I'm sure some of you have dealt with that. But what we're going to do this year is simple, plain white printer paper, and it's going to have to go into a business size envelope because that can get through anywhere. And we'll ask that people, either just stick with black and white or colored pencil is usually safe. Most of the cards that we made, we sent out, 250 or so cards last year, and most of them got through. We got some returned. And that was because, for the most part, it was because the volunteers didn't follow our rules. They couldn't resist putting like a glittery pen in there, and you can't do that. So, but for the most part, they get in. And again, rules are tighter this year. So we're just going to have to, they're going to be very, very kind of minimalist, bare bones cards, but it's the sentiment that matters. So we're not going to let that stop us. Oh, thank you, Sandra. Yeah, one of the exhibitions that we needed to cancel, unfortunately, was going to be at Seekers, and so they've put some of the work online, which is wonderful. So I want to introduce you to Carol Alden, who I've been in touch with. Carol and I met through the mail 3 years ago, maybe now, 3 years ago, I guess, through Carol's mom. So we met while Carol was still incarcerated in Utah, and Carol's mother had reached out to me to introduce herself and tell me about her daughter, who was just a phenomenal artist, and wanted to see about getting Carol's work featured on our site and Carol involved with our organization. And so Carol and I started writing and talking and have been connected all along. And Carol got out a year and a half ago now, or so, almost a year and a half now. And I got to meet her in person just a few weeks after she got out, and we shipped her off to a national conference in California. And we got to meet in person there for the first time and just have been really connected ever since. And it's always an honor to be able to share Carol's artwork. And it's been even more of an honor to be able to have Carol accompany me to many of the events that we've been doing over the past few months. Carol's an amazing storyteller, just as she is an amazing artist. And and just a heck of a lot of fun. So I am going to turn things over to Carol, and she can tell you a lot more about herself. And Carol, when you want me to start sharing your artwork, let me know and I can do that. I imagine you have a lot more to say before I do that, though.
All right. Yeah, it's an amazing storyteller. That's probably what my parents would have said when I was little. It didn't always serve me well. But I started my journey on incarceration when I was 46 years old. This was back in 2006. I was in a marriage that ended up having just an intense amount of violence in it. And one night it came to a head and I shot the man while he had me cornered. And Utah doesn't really, well, back then they didn't have any self-defense laws. So I was initially looking at life in prison, and it ended up being knocked down to a 1 to 15. So, and they gave me the whole 15 years and told me that they hoped I died in prison. So that's what I started out with. I was a mother of 5 children. I had a really involved studio I was welding and doing fiber arts and ceramics and glasswork. And I had a herd of llamas and alpacas and peacocks, and it was kind of like lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, I did a lot of rescue work with reptiles and just about anything that people discarded. And so I've always kind of been a caretaker of both animals and people, and sometimes that kind of backfires on you. However, when I first went to jail, we had colored pencils, and so I did some drawing. And actually, in a minute we'll see some drawings that I started doing there. But during the time that I was in Utah State Prison, I taught myself how to crochet. And trying to do artwork in prison is it's like an open act of rebellion. They don't, in the prison I was in at any rate, they did not approve of creativity of any type at all. Even if they would sell you the materials, they frequently took them away from you. If you wanted to create something, crochet a piece, you would have to fill out a contract. And about 5 different levels of officers, from anywhere from the sergeants all the way up to the captains and the deputy warden, had to sign it before you were allowed to crochet a blanket or a beanie or a stuffed animal, anything at all. So it would take approximately 2 to 3 months to get your contract back. You had to prove that you had purchased your own yarn and your own crochet hooks off of the commissary, and say exactly what you were going to make and exactly what colors you were going to use. And basically, the second you had it done, it had to be shipped out. So you had to prove that you had money on your books in order to mail it out. And even if you did all of these things, SWAT would still come through on a regular basis, about every 3 months or so, and tear your cell apart and take away your artwork and throw it away. So in all the years that I was down, probably 25% of the artwork that I made actually made it out of the facility. And it was one of those things that was so distressing to women to try to make things for their children, to try to stay connected with their loved ones, and to have it all just taken away in the blink of an eye. And usually under circumstances where they were going out of their way to humiliate you as well. I spent a little bit of time on a parking lot with my face to the ground with a guy's boot on my neck while he berated me as to how many skeins of yarn I had. Now, obviously, this is, incredibly dangerous for the facility, for somebody to have, more balls of yarn than the handbook says that you're allowed to. Never mind shanks and drugs and things. This woman has too much yarn. So it was a very restrictive environment. And when I wasn't working with yarn, well, I was out there sculpting snow, or I was planting gardens, or for example, they didn't allow me to have seeds or plants or things for the garden area that I was supposed to be taking care of as a job. So I would feed the birds out there. I'd get everybody's crusts of bread, throw them out in this one part of the yard, and the birds would come. And when birds come and eat, birds poop. And when birds poop, there's seeds. And so in the springtime, there'd be all these new plants that would come up. And I would very carefully gather them all up and kind of sort them out and decide which ones were flowers, which were trees, whatever they were. And then replant them in various areas of the yard. And I was able to maintain a beautiful area for the Native American ceremonies just by doing that. So you had to really think outside of the box if you wanted to improve your environment in any way, shape, or form. And really pay attention to if there were any officers at all that had any interest in encouraging other inmates and seeing if, they could actually do something with their time. Because that wasn't really encouraged by the major people there. The higher ups were, they were almost as punitive to the officers that helped inmates as they were to the inmates themselves. So you had to be very, very careful of the politics that went on in the area, because you didn't want anybody to know that an officer was actually being supportive, because they would usually get transferred to a different part of the prison. So we tended to be very protective of any officers that would come through and say, well, for example, I had one officer come up behind me while I was drawing one day, and he said, if you don't want to lose those drawings, make sure you store them in a manila envelope that is addressed as if it's ready to mail out, because they're not allowed to mess with your mail. But if you just have them in a folder or a binder, they're going to destroy them just for the fun of it. So, it was tricky. I spent a year in the jail, getting ready to be transported to the prison. I was at the prison from 2007 until 2014. And then they transferred me to another county jail, which is something, I don't know how many states do this, but Utah has this practice where they county you out, which means they house you in a county instead of in the prison. In the prison, you have more access to a lot of things. You can go outside, you can go to a gym, there's a library, there's usually some sort of educational classes. When you go to a jail, they're not geared towards keeping people for more than a few days to a few months. And so all of a sudden you're in an environment where many times there are no art supplies, no yarn, really nothing. You can't go outside. There isn't a regular church. There's not a regular library. We had one very small room that they would hold classes in, like AA. There was one wall that had a few books in it from the 70s, basically. It was a really difficult environment to transition to from the prison, because I used to spend pretty much from sun up to sundown outside, working in the garden or crocheting outside or drawing outside. So all of a sudden you're in a cell and you come out for lunch, your meals, and that's pretty much it. It was an easy place to become mired in depression, especially when you have, all of these short timers that are, just like I said, coming in for the weekend. And it's like, okay, well, this is going to be my home for, about a decade. And I have to live here. And all these people are fussing about being there for a weekend. And so those of us that were transferred from the prison, we tended to really isolate ourselves and kind of stick together a little bit. But after a while, I started kind of paying attention to the girls that were really struggling and that kept to themselves, and that had, especially if they had small children. And I started taking them one at a time because we weren't allowed to teach classes there. So I took them one at a time, and I'd find out the age of their kid and what they were interested in. And then it was like, well, I bet your son would like a dinosaur. How about if we make yourself a dinosaur? I'd say, oh, they can't do that. They didn't know how to crochet. They'd never learned how to crochet. I said, well, we can do this. If I can do it, you can do it. So we'd sit down and I'd show them how to do stitches, and I'd show them how to design things themselves. And pretty soon, they were making little toys and things for their kids. And I saw a huge impact on just their basic demeanor, how they interacted with people, their level of depression, their ability to find joy in things, because, they were developing a skill. And not only were they developing a skill that gave them some more self-esteem, but it also showed them that they were still capable of learning and that they were capable of succeeding at something, instead of just going and marinating in your failure, which is what most people end up doing when they're incarcerated. And it helped create the connections that they couldn't have simply by talking or writing. Talking and writing are so important, but at the same time, when some of these people have gone in and out, their families just don't really want to hear it anymore. And they feel even more isolated. And because, they're making promises and they're expressing their hopes of how things are going to be the next time, but they don't really have the tools to change that until they've developed some confidence in themselves in trying new things. Because otherwise they're just getting out with the same skills and the same attitudes that they had going in. And no matter how much they hope, it just doesn't work. So to develop a new skill, to be able to apply it to a relationship, to where now your child actually has something tangible that they can hold and talk to and snuggle up with and know that their mommy loves them, that was a huge, huge deal for them. So I really enjoyed that part of my interaction with other inmates, even though, otherwise I didn't really fit in very well because I didn't have a criminal history. I'd been, like I said, a mom and very active in the community, and had a career for years prior to that. So it was a big shock to the system. But Wendy, would you like to cue up some pictures?
Give me 1 sec just to get it all set up. I hope this works.
Do you want to? Is it just to show the whole thing, or can you do it like one at a time?
I am going to try, Carol, to do it one at a time. We'll see.
Do you want to start with the triptych?
1 sec. So yeah, they're piled on top of each other. Yeah,
all right.
Sorry about that. Think about if there's a better way. I don't know a better way, my friend.
Okay. Well, we'll run with it here.
Okay.
So this picture on the top of the pile.
There we go. I can block everything else out.
There you go. So I initially did a version of this drawing when I was very first incarcerated, and I was looking at a 20 to life. And I really did not see any future that I would be with my children. I felt completely dehumanized by the process that happens when you are first incarcerated. Just the lack of humanity that you're treated with. It was very, very difficult to adjust to. And I was, extremely suicidal. They kept me in a suicide observation cell for, oh gosh, I think it was like 4 months. And and my artwork was really the only thing that kept me there. But this picture depicted pretty much how I felt. I felt immobilized. I felt in pain. I felt like there was nothing I could do. There was all this, pressure on my head. There was physical pain. I was essentially watching my hopes and dreams and my children just disappear on the horizon. And I had to get that out of my system, basically. Now, the next one in the series, these other two I did later on. Let's see, that's the last one. So the one before that. There's the one with the woman that's crocheting is the one that comes next. There we go. Okay, so this one symbolized getting to the point where I felt like I'd adjusted to my environment about as well as anybody could. And I was feeling kind of defiant about the whole thing. I kind of felt like the state of Utah picked up where an abusive spouse left off, and that they were just kind of trying to finish it. So I figure, here I am. I'm going to do what I can with my time, and my artwork is going to make it out of this place. They might have me in here, but they don't have my spirit in here. My spirit will still go out and speak to people through my work, regardless of where my body is stuck. So that's essentially the gist of this picture. The last one, this one I did when I was approaching release. When I figured I was about 5 years away from being released, I started really thinking about how I was going to nurture the dreams that I had to turn them into some sort of reality when I got out. So the embryo that the child is holding, that's those dreams. The child is the part of you inside that interacts with the world, but also tries to keep your dreams safe. And the fish represents all the layers that you have surrounding your emotions to keep you safe and sane while you're incarcerated. You kind of have to develop a persona that it's like the only part of yourself that you exhibit to other inmates and to the officers, so that they will leave you alone. And by leave you alone, I just mean, not harass you, not harm you, not steal from you, whatever it takes. And for some people, that can be a very scary persona. For me, I pretty much just kept to myself and didn't engage in a lot of the stuff that went on. Didn't talk about people, didn't engage in commerce at all of any sort, and just was quiet and observed. But if something important was going on, then yeah, I had an opinion. It's when people would get abusive towards other inmates, that was something that I did not tolerate. I didn't care who it was. I would come out of my cell and I'd say, look, if you do something stupid in front of me that harms somebody else, you better believe I'm going to tell on you. I will be the first one to push the button and say, this is not going to fly. And because they like to intimidate people and call you a snitch and threaten you and whatnot. So I just let it be known right from the get-go that this was not going to be tolerated. And it made a difference. And I didn't have anybody try to harm me while I was in there. And I ended up giving people a lot of advice and kind of being, I don't know, kind of a psychological protector in some ways. So this is this picture. This is what it all means. The only problem was that shortly after I did this drawing, I was released unexpectedly 2 years early. And I was not ready to get out. I had nothing in place. I had no place to go. I didn't have the resources saved that I thought that I would. And so it was incredibly stressful. to get out. And that brings us to, we'll go ahead with the fish house now. Okay, so this was a fun piece. I decided that since I was not going to be able to afford normal housing when I got out, that I should build myself a tiny home. And if I was going to build myself a tiny home, I wanted it to be mobile, and I wanted it to advertise my career. And I wanted to be able to travel cross country and teach classes and help other battered women network. So I had this idea and I tried to describe it to people, and, you know, they just kind of thought I was a lunatic or something, I guess. So I thought, well, I'll make a 3-dimensional model so that people can see what's inside my head. And I thought it would be a fun project to get my granddaughters interested in learning construction skills and having something that we could do together. So I made this 3-dimensional crocheted model of this tiny house that I wanted to build. And do you want to show the interior picture? Yeah, this is an angle from inside. I started out with just the basic structure, and then I kind of thought, well, it'd be kind of fun to decorate it. Let's see what it would look like to design the inside. And so I did all the furniture and the plants. There was even a pet iguana in there. I made the bathroom with a jacuzzi and a stacking washer and dryer. I made a sewing machine and a computer area, and there's like a little deli booth that I did cups of coffee and plates and silverware and everything. And after it was all done, I gave it to my grandchildren at a visit and had them take it home so they could look at it. And about a year later, my daughter told me about an art exhibit that they were having in Salt Lake, and it was through the Museum Association. And I really wanted to enter a piece, but I wasn't sure if I had anything that I could finish in time. And so I said, well, pick out one of my older pieces. And she suggested this one, and I said, oh no, I don't feel like it's professional enough for this venue. You know, these are people that are doing bronzes and oil paintings and things. You know, they're going to look at this and say, it's yarn, it's craft. Well, she didn't listen to me. She went ahead and entered it. And I get this phone call about a month later. And first of all, you don't get phone calls when you're in jail or prison unless something horrible has happened to some member of your family. So when they called me on the intercom and said I had a phone call, I just about died. You know, I get emotional even now just thinking about it. Anyway, I went out wondering which one of my children or other family members or my mother had passed away or what had happened. And I had this cheerful woman on the other end of the phone who says, oh, she's so excited to talk to me. And that the piece that I did put in the show had won Best of Show, and the Museum Association wanted to purchase it for the permanent collection for Utah State. And I'm still trying to process who's not dead, who's dead. So it was really, really difficult to even pay attention to what she was telling me at that point. But I didn't even know which piece she had. And it turned out to be this piece. And so the state of Utah, while I was incarcerated, actually paid me about $4,000 for this sculptured yarn fish house. And that ended up being the money that I used when I got out to actually purchase a 1975 Dodge motorhome that I subsequently gutted, and I'm in the process of tearing it down to the frame to turn into a real fish house that I will drive cross country as soon as I'm off of parole. So it just ended up being kind of a really wonderful, circuitous bunch of events that weren't I just never would have imagined it at all. Okay, so any other picture now, Wendy, is fine. So let's see.
Carol, talk about the size of these.
Okay. They are rather large compared to this picture of this. It kind of looks like a big fantail goldfish, but it has like a prison window in the side. And actually the interior of it is a replica of a prison cell. And there is a woman kneeling and her chest is open and she's holding her heart on the outside of the bars and she has no face, which basically is how you feel when you're in prison. But that piece is, what, is it about 7 feet long when you spread it out? Something like that.
I would say, and it probably weighs about 12 pounds. It's hefty.
One of the things we weren't allowed to do is stuff things. And so what I would do is make layers of crochet, kind of like walls. And I would do three layers, an internal one, an external one, and then one that was in the middle. And I would put anywhere from 3 to 5 strands of yarn on a hook at a time. And so when you crocheted it, you got something that was really, really thick and stiff, almost like carpet backing. It was, and then I would hand stitch through all layers and pull it really tight. And so these things would hold their shape even without any kind of internal structure whatsoever, except for the bars on this, which were made from, those are basically slip covered Bic pens. And both the internal barrel for the skinny parts and the external barrel for the fatter ones.
And you can't see the inside very well in this picture. It's hard to see it in any of the photos we have, but as Carol said, it's the inside of her cell. So there's a bunk, a little desk, a toilet, a shelf, right?
Yep.
And a lamp on the ceiling. So we have this piece here. I have it in Tacoma because we've used it for a couple of exhibitions now. But Carol somehow managed, and her son, right, and your son, right, to fashion a working light at the top, a little LED light that lights up the interior of the fish, which is
with
amazing.
a battery pack, I think, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. We're looking for a new home for this fish. If anyone's interested in in making a purchase.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so this is one of the pieces that SWAT took away from me. But then they didn't throw it away. They stuck it somewhere. There was a girl, she came to me like a year later and said, I think some of your work is behind the furnace in the closet. And went and looked, and sure enough, some of my artwork had been shoved back there. And so I was able to reclaim a few things and have them shipped out. But this piece is probably about almost 5 feet long, I guess. And again, it's pretty heavy. But it's hollow. You can put your arm all the way down inside into the tail. Next. This is my mom's favorite piece that I did while I was in. I did this one while I was at the jail, and I was very happy because there was an officer that was over commissary that actually let me get some sparkly yarn. So that was just like, 5 Christmases rolled into one to have sparkly yarn. And so I had to be very judicious with mixing it with other colors to make it last longer. But this is like a horned lizard, or people call them horny toads. And it is about 5 feet long and about 3.5 feet wide. He's big. And he's gone to a lot of exhibits, both while I was in prison and since I've been out. And this is a red-tailed catfish, and I did this one for a wildlife exhibit at the zoo in Salt Lake City. And again, he was another one that I had sparkly silk yarn that I mixed with all the different shades of gray. He's actually got like 5 different shades of gray within him. When I was at the jail, my artwork really blossomed because there were a few officers there who were very intrigued with the fact that I was trying to do something so different and extravagant from what they were used to. And so commissary there was very different because it was such a small facility. I mean, we usually only had about 79 inmates there, and half of them were men, half were women. They would just go to Walmart and just buy the things that they thought we needed or that we might purchase. So I had a lot more options for yarn while I was there. And here's a Cadillac. And this is a piece that I did as a donation for the Battered Women's Shelter, or not Battered Women's Shelter, I'm sorry, the Rape Crisis Center. Those were my 2, well, I had 3 charities that I did a lot of work for that most of my stuff was donated to. There was the Battered Women's Shelter, the Rape Crisis Center, and then the Road Home Homeless Shelter in Salt Lake, because all 3 of those things myself and my children had encountered in our life. And this Cadillac was about 3 feet long and about 1 foot wide. And I actually had an officer let me out of my cell in the middle of the night and go down to the kitchen, and we cut pop bottles into the shape of the windshield and melted holes in them so that I could stitch it in to the framework and have something a little bit more realistic. So that was fun. Now this is the last piece that I did before I was incarcerated. And I welded this piece out of 2,000 feet of steel rod. And the finished piece was 18 feet tall and 90 feet long. These big side fins that are coming out, the pink ones, those are 20 feet long right there. And I engineered it to float. And I did this piece for the Utah Arts Festival in, the last week of June in 2006. And I have recently replaced my welder, and I'm getting ready to do another series of floating fish pieces or water creature pieces. And it will also help me with the basic structure of the fish house, which I'll weld that framework and then cover it with some chicken wire, and then it will kind of turn into a giant paper mache project, except using polyester resins or instead of wheat paste. Hold up a little bit better. So this is what I came from, was doing, sculptures like this. And that was, my full-time job, was doing these big sculptures. And then to go to the prison environment and all of a sudden not really have anything to do and trying to adapt that previous interest into the materials that I had available to me was just, it was very challenging. And the gingerbread project that they would do for charity was a big part of kind of developing skills too. They would, even though I was not a kitchen worker, they would import me into the kitchen every fall to do all the sculpting for their gingerbread stuff that would be donated to the Festival of Trees where they would auction them off for charity. And our gingerbread houses would usually bring in about $5,000. So that was a lot of fun. And it was also very frustrating because food is really difficult to work with. It doesn't stay where you put it when you sculpt with it, like steel or marble or anything else does. And is that all the pictures?
That is all the pictures. And I see that
oh.
we've got a question for you in the chat. I imagine there are more, but there's a question: why fish? What about fish drew you to depict them through your art?
Well, part of what intrigues me about fish is how little we know about them. And so for me, it's kind of, being thrown in prison was kind of like being thrown in the ocean. I didn't know what to do with myself at first. It was such a foreign environment. And so being in prison, it was kind of like, okay, now I need to relearn how to breathe. I need to relearn how to swim. I need to relearn how to communicate. I need to be a completely different creature than I ever saw myself being. And so there was a lot of, this evolution that comes through the water. We say all life comes from the ocean. And that's kind of how I felt. I felt like I was going back to, you get to be a zygote and you get to relearn life and just be something entirely different if you want to survive. And when you get out, you're going to be something even more different, because the world changes, even though you do not so much while you're in prison, because you don't see all the things that people are learning as they go along. I felt like I was basically Amish, when I got out. I had no idea about technology. I really hadn't worked with computers. I had never had a cell phone. It was like being a time traveler to get out and contend with all these things. I mean, it took them about an hour to teach me how to just work the dashboard on my car when I first purchased it. I still look for my keys, and everything's push button and keyless and whatnot. And it's very, very strange to me even now. But the fish, it's still, I love how fluid they are. I love how they evolve. I love, some of them can change from female to male. Some of them reproduce in strange ways. They're so foreign and they're so diverse, and they can exist in the most harsh environments possible. So I think there's a lot in fish that I don't know, we can learn from and apply to our own lives. So and they're beautiful. They're just, and I want to feel beautiful, whether I'm beautiful or not. I want to feel like I am, and just move through life smoothly and, eat what I want, do what I want, just have some freedom to just enjoy the world around me. And being able to get up in the morning and go outside and look at the sky, or in the middle of the night, go see the sky. I mean, I used to volunteer for the 3 a.m. snow shoveling crews just so I could see the moon and feel how quiet it was and see the crystals in the snow. And to have that out of your life for so long and get these little opportunities, it was just stunning. It makes the smallest things in life breathtaking, to be able to appreciate. That's why I'm so grateful right now. I actually have orchids in my room right now. And I never thought it.
Carol, can you see the chat?
Let's see. This is where it's like, I need my new glasses.
You ordered them, right?
Okay, so
it's okay. Patricia just shared. She said, "You are beautiful."
Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay, yeah. I'm looking at the chat now.
And I guess if anyone else has questions, feel free to just unmute yourself and talk. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
People have a question
Or chat, either way.
Let's take a few more minutes.
Yeah.
Feel free to do so.
Where are you living now?
Well, right now, I'm still in Utah because I'm on parole, but I'm down in Washington County, kind of near St. George, which the area is absolutely beautiful. We're kind of, the Gateway to Zion National Park. If you're going to live in poverty in Utah, then you, you might as well be somewhere where it's beautiful, right? So, but my living situation, as far as the nuts and bolts of it, is very tenuous and kind of scary right now. So I'll be really glad when I can move. It's just, it was difficult to find any kind of work. I still cannot find a job that actually supports me in this area. Everything is, even the ones that say that they're felon friendly, it only goes so far as if you have a violent offense or if you're a sex offender, then you're off the list. And so I'm working through Easter seals right now as a docent at a small mining museum, but it's just a few hours a week. So I'm basically have a room in a house that I'm trading for a.
You're kind of breaking up a bit.
Okay.
Could you just repeat what you just said?
I said right now I'm living in a room in a house in exchange for helping an elderly gentleman who has alcohol problems. So it's not very pleasant.
Yeah. How much longer are you on parole?
Till July 27th of this coming year. And
Not
at that, hopefully, if I have the fish house done by then or shortly thereafter, then there's a documentary film crew that plans on coming and filming part of that and kind of following me across country on my maiden voyage.
Here's a question. How have you managed to emerge from this experience without anger or resentment?
Well, it depends on the day. I mean, like all of us, I think, we compartmentalize a lot if we know that it's not conducive to, your day-to-day ability to cope with things. And every now and then, I do feel anger and resentment at times. And I've had organizations offer to assist me in suing the state for failure to protect because of how my situation evolved and the officers, the way they handled things that were covered up. And I thought about this, and I really don't want to waste another big chunk of my life on being angry and rehashing all this stuff. I want to move forward. I want to enjoy life, and I want to enjoy people. And you can't do that if you're completely invested in everything that everybody ever did wrong to you.
So my wife asks, are you in touch with your children?
Yes. It's this year has been really hard because you get out of prison and you have these visions of being enveloped back into your family and maybe living with part of your family, or just really being able to spend time with them. And when COVID hit, all that went away. And so all of a sudden, the only way I see my children is basically in video chats. And because they're Most of them are in the Salt Lake area. I have one daughter down here in a adjoining town and three granddaughters. But, I don't feel it's just not really safe for us to mingle at this point in time.
Right. A related question: how often could you see your children, your grandchildren, or other family members while you were incarcerated?
Well, at the prison, they had kind of a fairly liberal schedule as far as I could have had visits 3 times a week, but they're also very restrictive about so many different things that, your family might come to try to visit you and then they'll be turned away because they have the wrong colored shirt on, or there's a nickel sized hole in their pants, or, just they were very, very petty about things like that. I had one daughter who had a surgical rod in her leg and they accused her of hiding, metal in her clothing. And when she told them that it was on file that she had this medical device, they said they didn't like her attitude. And so she was banned for 6 months. So, that was really, really hard. And then at the jail, the jail that I was at was the only jail in the state that had contact visits. So that was amazing, but you were only allowed one a month. And it was quite a distance from anyone in my family. So they tried. I mean, they kind of took turns and they did their best to come up and see me from time to time.
Another question: what art projects are you working on now, and what do you envision for next?
Well, the biggest project I'm working on right now is the fish house. I've been gathering all the steel and the materials for that. And I've also, well, behind me, you can see I have all these wonderful fibers and fabrics. I've been kind of replenishing my palette to work with. So I'm getting ready to do a whole series of vehicles that are shaped like sea creatures and different kinds of critters. I also have chickens now, and so I think that's going to figure heavily into some of the work that I do.
So it's time for maybe one more question or a comment. Going once, going twice.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
I really would like, on behalf of the group, to express our great appreciation for taking the time to share your life, your experiences, and your art, especially with us. The photos of the art is really super, and many people are saying how inspiring your words are, and I think we all felt that way. So I think we all, if everyone can raise their hands and say thank you this way, so everyone can see, that would be great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So
You're welcome.
yeah. I want to thank Wendy for suggesting that we invite Carol to share her story with us and her art. And I really appreciate all the work that Wendy does through her art organization. So
Thank you.
thank you so much for coming tonight.
Yeah.
You're welcome to stay. But we're going to share. I spend a little time with the pen pals, see if there are issues that have come up in their correspondence that they would like to share with the group and get some feedback from the group about. So
I'd love to stay, and I think Jamie and Jocelyn will too. Carol, I don't know if you will, but we are planning right now an event for the pen pals in our program to have a similar conversation about the kinds of challenges they face, and we haven't done that before. So I'm eager to hear how your discussion goes and what kind of issues are arising for folks.
Okay, great. Okay. Yeah, people want, I think you guys just can unmute yourself if you want to raise an issue or or just a reflection on your correspondence. Doesn't necessarily have to be an issue, but just something that you'd like to share with the group would be great.
I can offer share
Sure,
one
please.
experience that I just had. I'm fairly new. Let's see, my correspondence with my pen pal began in July. We've exchanged about 5 letters, targeted, thinking once a month, and was expecting to do an exchange of letters such that, I would write, well, I started, but then I would write again once I got my pen pal's letter. And that was all, good, but it ended up being about once a month. And recently he didn't get one of my letters. It was because of I think I must have done it on 2 sides. Anyway, clearly he was pretty upset. And not only that, I mean, just, not in a bad way, but in the way of, or not bad, as in angry towards me, but just disappointed, and it just really struck me the intensity of the level of, his appreciation for the communication and the ability to also express himself in his letters, not just to hear from me, but to know that I'm listening to his, what he's expressing in his letters. Anyway, and then I realized that it would be helpful, I think, for our communications for me to write more frequently and not always just to wait for his letter. I know he's writing pretty quickly, I think, after receiving mine, but it's just the time it takes to go, through the mail and the process. And so that was just sort of a reflection I've had recently that I think will help him, both of us really, to just write a little more frequently.
Thanks for sharing that. Appreciate it.
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that you can communicate with your pen pal electronically by email. If you go on Core Links, and it works really terrific. I mean, it really, once you sign up for it, I've found that it is, you just don't encounter all of these, frankly, petty obstacles to the kinds of letters that you can write. And you can write frequently because it's an email, so it doesn't have to last that long, and it can be a response to an immediate event.
I appreciate knowing that, but can you sort of spell that out more specifically? How would I?
I'll send a note about that.
Okay.
Everybody. But just the only thing I would just caution you about is that not everyone has access to Corlink. They don't give access to everyone.
Okay.
So you have to find that out if they have access.
Right.
If they have access, then it's taken away from them. So just to be aware of that.
Yeah.
But I'll send you the how to register for Corlinks to the whole group.
Yeah, that's not available at the penitentiary level, is it?
It's available in the federal system, but as I said, not everyone has access to it.
Do you know what it determines access?
Well, it's one at a time. Marty, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to know what determines access. Is it punishment or is it?
Who knows?
Yeah,
there's all kinds of they'll say it's for security reasons. Whatever they'll say. So it's a privilege, and I think one of the ways they exert control is by giving and taking away privileges.
Thank you.
Who else wanted to say something about that? Yes, Sandra.
So 2 of my pen pals, which I'm delighted about, got released. Both a little bit unexpectedly and early. One sent to halfway house and one put on parole. But they did not send a forwarding address to me beforehand. I think it really did happen very quickly. And I've had a relationship with them for years. And so I really want to be in touch. I wrote, for the one on parole, I wrote to the BOP by email and asked if there was any way they could let me know where I could write. And I wrote a letter to my female pen pal and asked them to forward it. But I haven't heard anything, and it's been a couple of months. And
I don't know if they'll do that.
yeah, it's just, it was so sudden, and they were both long-term pen pals, and it's, I feel bereft.
Yeah, it's a loss. Yeah, it's a loss. Yeah. Especially if you had no way to transition out of the relationship,
Right.
or to the next phase of it. So yeah, that's.
And both of them had expressed a desire. They both knew they had hearings coming up. They expressed a desire to keep in touch, and the way things work, you just never know. So it's a little bit sad.
Yeah.
And I'd love another female pen pal. You can send me somebody if you have a waiting list.
Good to know.
Wendy, this is John. I'm corresponding with someone who writes poetry quite well, and he's hoping to get what he's producing published. My question is, could I refer him to you or your group? Or that's not really how you operate?
We get that question a lot. You certainly can. We're not going to be able to provide professional advice on publishing, but we can try to help. And we have some of our correspondence volunteers who do know a little something about that and might be able to chime in to help. Jamie, am I being honest, Jamie?
Sorry, how to find my unmute. Yes, and definitely we share, I mean, it's not publishing, but we do share the work of poets that we receive in our online galleries, just like we share art. So it is an opportunity, to have your poems read and seen.
And sometimes we feature them in our blog as well.
Right.
And
in
Wendy,
our partner project, we can sometimes partner someone with a professional poet or some.
And we've also had opportunities to be able to, like, through the Pen America's prison writing program, opportunities to provide people with like publishing there. And also, Pen America is also a good resource for that. Yes, sorry, Sandra.
And also, I don't know, Wendy, if you still have someone from Free Minds on your board, but Free Minds Book Club is specifically around writing, and they're actually started locally here in the DMV.
Right.
And they have a website as well.
Yeah, that tends to be for youth from the DMV. Just to put the parameters around that, may or may not apply.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but they may be able to they might have some ideas.
Yeah.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, Lucy. Lucy, who else would like to speak?
Yeah, thanks for the program tonight and also for this opportunity. I have two pen pals with whom I correspond quite regularly, both in the federal system in Illinois, and also send them books as long as they're new books that come from the publisher direct to them. I can send it to them, and that's been really, really important and appreciated by them. I can't be any books that I order and then resend. That doesn't work. But they've been asking for photographs of me, and they're asking for telephone calls. And I'm nervous about both and wanted to get other people's opinion. I've not offered either.
Well, I think one of my basic rules is if you feel funny about it or anxious, don't do it. You just say.
Well, I might feel less funny if people tell me it's okay, but it's a journey. I just would like to get other people's opinion. Has anybody done either of those things?
Send picture. I've sent pictures.
Oh, you have.
I have, yes. And they, it's hard to do because you can't. In my case, I can't do it over core links. You have to send pictures through snail mail. But I've just taken the photos, printed them on a printer, and at a standard size, and put them in an envelope. And they take a while to get there. There's also a service that allows you to send pictures that are on postcards.
Mhm.
Chuck, do you remember the name of that?
Flick Shop, F-L-I-K.
Yes.
Okay.
And that also is very nice. It's not that expensive. You can use your own, photos. They don't need to be of you, but just photos, and that it's another interesting piece of mail that folks receive. But I didn't even know phone calls were possible. I'm interested in that issue as well. I never even thought of it.
So for several years, I was a volunteer chaplain at North Branch Correctional Institution, which is the maximum security prison in Maryland. It's in Cumberland. And I would go once a month. I met with a whole group of people, anywhere from 10 to 20 who are interested in Judaism. And I would give a little over an hour talk about some aspect of Judaism, Jewish life, Jewish thought, etc. In any case, there were people involved in that group that I sustained correspondence with, and this one person said he really wanted to convert, and I said to the group that, well, you could, once you're out of prison, well, you can talk about conversion. It's not going to happen in prison. In any case, this one man who I've known now for 7 years called me every Sunday. He was regularly, as Craney can testify, and just he was in the Maryland system. He was arrested at 17 for 3 armed robberies. He was given a 30-year sentence, and came up for parole a number of times. I would write letters to the parole board to back up his parole, and he usually was denied for some stupid reason. That's my personal opinion. So just about 3 weeks ago, he was paroled. And I actually met with him. But in any case, all I'm saying about that is that he called me regularly, and I didn't feel uncomfortable about it. And I always felt, he had a terrible childhood, series of foster homes, terribly chaotic teenage adolescence, and he clearly, he was in prison for 22 years. He's now 39. It's clearly he wanted. I think Judaism was something that attracted to him because it has so much structure. We have lots of rules, and I think that was very comforting to him to have that structure. And in any case, we have this relationship. It still exists now. We actually found out what was both awful and amazing to me was that they gave him parole like what Sandra just said. They just boom, could be because of COVID and all that, but without much warning, and they gave him 2 weeks warning. And he's been in prison since 17, 39 now. He didn't have relations with his family. And he only knew me and one other person, right? And he was just dumped on the street without any resources, without any guidance of where to get resources. So fortunately, through help of someone else who was very involved with us, we found a program for him. And we found out that in Baltimore, Amazon is hiring. You may have seen the press, in the press, how Amazon hires like 1,000 people every day now. So he got a job at Amazon, simple job. So he's able to sustain himself. And we're able to find an interesting program, a housing program for him, in a small little group home. So I guess it's a long answer to the question, but I do think having, if they want to call you, that's obviously it's a deepening of the relationship, and that's another bridge to cross, and I can understand if you may be hesitant to cross it. But for me, it's worked out very well. We're getting very close, and hopefully I can find a rabbi in Baltimore who will help him convert, because he wants to convert.
Lucy, I would just say that I sent just from my printer off of a file on my computer, I sent a picture of myself to a couple of my pen pals. I have not shared my phone number with any of them. I don't like talking on the phone. So I one of them I specifically did not, because he was going to be released locally, and in fact was. And I didn't feel comfortable. I was very happy to write to him for many years, but I have also sent black and white printouts of my artwork, both to my iahr pen pals and to my JAC pen pals, and they've always gotten through. They haven't been confiscated at the prisons, and that's been a great source of conversation by mail. And I would just add, Flick Shop is terrific, and was started by a formerly incarcerated man, and his whole family is involved. It's a great way to get a quick note.
When we started this program, he was our keynote speaker, actually.
Yeah. Okay.
Marcus,
Goodwinter.
I think it was last name.
Bullock.
If you could send those contacts, that would be good. It was more the anxiety of if they would come out and find me kind of thing, but I'm here.
I understand.
Yeah, but anyway, I want to say one other thing. Just because it's important to report these things. These guys have been in solitary now for 10 months. Allegedly for COVID, clearly for management. It's quite a brutal and horrible situation, as I understand it. The food's terrible, the conditions are awful. And just for the record, it's really, really rough. I think the correspondence has meant enormously to them. They have both said so.
Hazel, did you wanted to say something? You need to unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm unmuted. I had a question about CoreLink. Early on, my pen pal said he'd be glad to email with me if I was willing, and I was, and I signed up, and I never heard anything further. Did I drop the ball, or does he need to get in touch with me first? Because I don't have his email address.
Yeah, he has to be.
Yeah, well, he has.
He has to approve you. That's how CoreLink swings. So he has to put you on his list.
Well, I'll mention it in my next letter because he wanted to do that, but then I never heard back. So I'll double back on that.
Yeah. Okay. Pat. Yeah. Pat.
Yes, thank you. Could you put the name of the what Flick Shop, that's what it's called? Okay, you could put that in the chat. Yeah, I have not, well, the envelope that you sent the letter in was postmarked May 11th. My guy never dates his letters, so, but I haven't heard from him since then. And when I wrote to him, well, the last letter I got, he said something about he'd just gotten out of the shoe. So I have a horrible feeling he's back in there. And I don't know, what effect COVID or anything is having on that. And I don't suppose there's any way I can find anything out.
Well, basically the whole system has been in lockdown. So it's like then everybody's in solitary. Mm-hmm. That's how they've been dealing with it, unfortunately, in BOP. They've had a high rate of infection throughout the system in the Bureau of Prisons. Yeah,
I look at their website periodically, and where he is, Coleman, doesn't seem to be that bad, but yeah, they're all on lockdown.
Okay. Has anybody heard whether prisoners of any in any category are going to be among the priority groups to get the vaccine?
Good question.
I mean, they are they should be high priority. They certainly are in crowded, stressful conditions.
Right.
And they already have rates that are, vary, but are of concern inside the prison. So to think that they would have to, I hate to say this, but be at the end of the line to be vaccinated would just add to the pile of unfairness. And
I heard I'm trying to remember where I read this, that they would give priority to the staff, but not to the inmate.
Great.
Part of an activist group that I'm in has some access to the Biden campaign and transition team. And we've sent a policy paper, and one of the follow-ups was that we hoped that prison populations would be given the vaccine soon, because it is racing through the prisons at a horrible.
Thank you so much.
Whether that
I know, but
if you're part of any kind of group, and you can certainly just go online to the Biden website, and or the more they hear about it, the better.
But we might want to, let me think about a campaign about that. I have to research it some more, where the pressure needs to be placed. I mean, it is a problem now because of all this, going through this incredibly painful transition, and it's the people. Not all the people are in place, right? But I think it's a real issue.
One of my pen pals, COVID did race through, and while COVID was racing through, an inmate was brought in that also had chicken pox. And there were a number of people in the prison who had not ever had it and had not had a vaccine. And
wow. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Well, I really appreciate your attending the program, and I appreciate even more your writing here and sustaining the program the way you do. And I know it's we've received over so many times from returning citizens how important it is to receive mail while they're incarcerated. And so this is a wonderful good deed that we do, and I think it can be life-saving for people not to feel isolated, totally isolated. So thank you for all doing it, and please feel free to spread the word. I want to thank John for managing the program for IHR, and does a wonderful job with that. And thank everyone else. I will get back to you about core links. I'll send out a note to everyone about the procedure for that. Okay.
Flickshop is on.
And
the link to Flickshop is in the chat.
Yeah. Flickshop.com. Yeah. So it has a website. Go to it. You can download the app onto your phone. That's
how I do it.
That's the innovation of it. You can put it on if you have a smartphone, you can put it on your smartphone. And Marcus, the originator of this, Marcus Bullock, who also was arrested as a teenager for carjacking, I believe, in Virginia, and received an 8-year sentence. And fortunately, his family of origin was intact when he left prison. He was still a relatively young man, and he was able to go home. He had a roof over his head. He had 3 meals a day, etc. And he got a job selling paint at Sherwin-Williams, and he was pretty good at selling paint. And this man has got the entrepreneurial gene. Let me put it this way. And he realized while he was selling paint that painters would come to him and said, "Well, do you have any customers who are looking for a painter?" and he had customers coming to him saying, looking for painters. So he realized that he could make a match here. And so he went to the painters and said, if I send you some customers, will you give me 10% commission? And so he worked this out, and Sherwin-Williams was delighted because he sold more paint this way. And he became successful, and he was even promoted. He became a regional manager, whatever, regional rep. And then around 2011 or so he's been out for a long time, he quit his job. And his friends and family were just so upset with him. He had such a good job. Why would he do this? Had a great career there. And he said, I'm going to start my own business. And he started a small contracting business of painting and redoing floors. And slowly he built that up, and now he's a major contractor here in the district. So it's a real success story. And he said to me, when I talked to him, he said, I'm very busy. I have all these different businesses, but I feel guilty because I know a lot of people are still on the inside, and I never seem to have time to write to them. There must be a simpler way for me to do this, because when I get home, I'm tired and I put it off and I just don't get it. I don't do it. So he said, I know. What if I had an app that could send a message to someone on? It's really something simple. And so he devised a system where what the Flick Shop is you can write a message. The number of
300 characters.
300 characters, whatever the number of characters you can put in a message and you send it to his company, the Flick Shop company, and they print it on a postcard and send it out to the person who you're writing to, and on the inside. And since it's a message, you can also attach a photo if you want. Two, thank you. So you can at the most 2 photos. So you can put a short message plus 2 photos, and you can send this postcard off. And he does it by you buy so many points, and each postcard is so many points, and it's a relatively nominal price. The more points you buy, the less it is per point.
The most expensive is 99 cents a postcard.
Yeah, the most expensive is 99 cents a postcard, and if you buy more points in mass, then the unit price drops. So he's a real businessman and knows how to do all this, and he says to me that the post office picks up the mail at his business 3 times a day. And he has the address of every prison and jail in the country in his database. So he knows where, even if you don't know the exact address, he has it. And so he puts your message, your photo if you want, and the address of the prisoner, of the person incarcerated, and of course you need to make sure you send the number, the prisoner's number. So anyway, it's a simple way. It's a different way of communicating, and when if you're not in the mood to sit down and write a letter or do an email, if you can do that, this is another way of communicating with someone on the inside.
I do that fairly frequently with my pen pal, and that if I'm walking in Rock Creek Park, I'll take a couple of pictures and then I'll send them to, and my note is, this is what I've seen and hope you're doing well, and that takes up the whole postcard. And and most letters he tells me that he's received them and he appreciates seeing pictures of the outside. I think most people are family members who send, and they send family pictures. I haven't sent a picture of myself. Lucy, I did have an interesting experience with my first pen pal, who was from the district, and when he was getting ready to leave prison, he said he wanted to be in touch, and I said fine, and I used my real name. And when he got out, he was at a halfway home in Baltimore, and he actually called me on my cell phone. And I said, "How did you get this number?" And he said, "I was asking, you guys for a stamp to send you a note, and they said you can look it up online." And so he did, and we were in touch for a little while, and then he just stopped communicating with me, and I never found out why.
Wendy's about to sign off, so I want to say goodnight to her
Thank you.
and thank her again
Thank you. Thank you so much.
for helping setting up this program.
Yes.
And good luck to all your work with your organization.
And Carol, to you as well.
Yes, thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Carol.
Extraordinarily impressive. Thank you.
And thank you, Chuck.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Okay, any other, thank you for sharing that, Crane. And any other comments?
Just to say that Carol put her
Yeah.
contact information in the chat. So if you're interested in buying her work or writing to her or whatever, you can reach her through.
Right. And I have her email if you don't catch it. So if you want to write to her.
Okay.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
We're here.
Thanks,
Take care,
Chuck.
everybody. Happy holidays to everybody.
Yes, thanks so much.
And to you.
Thank you for all your work.
Have a good night.